Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 2. Chapter 8. My apologies for lack of etiquette, but I am not here to debate semantics, General. You wanted an update, and that is what you were presented. Debating its worth is for your counsel. Mira did her best to refine her comments to the congregate of hollow images surrounding the table she was leaning against. By all rights, you're suggesting authorized brutality or even market insurgency within their own ranks, fracturing cells, resistance to their own directives. The blue-lined and flickering image of General Draven ignored her previous comment. Mira resisted the urge to end the communication right there and then. She closed her eyes and managed to blow out a breath without revealing the exasperation that was taking hold of her. General, pardon my lack of propriety, and concerning your position, as well as the rest of you, she said within the circle of assembled leadership, motioning to all, it is not a matter of resisting directives. Despite what any of us would like to think or to call it, brutality is the directive, and as such, we need to reevaluate our tactics and strategies to compensate. Else the destruction of the Death Star will only become a footnote in the history of this empire, Miara stated, focusing the last of the comment on the image of Mon Mothma. We do understand collectively what is at stake, Captain. Through conversations such as these, we can work out our own strategies. We have always fed insurgency through ourselves, providing them with the means necessary to fuel their rebellions, the scope of which is, or was, completely within the purview of that leadership. General Maydeen spoke up, emphasizing the need for unity, adding to Mira's exasperation as the comment contained little context. General, what the captain is trying to convey is simply that their strategy has shifted, and we need to shift with it, or else we will be playing right into the very protocols they have enacted, springing the trap as it were. Mon Mothma returned the conversation to the immediate, much to Miara's satisfaction. Miara bowed her head forward slightly as she gripped the table before her, releasing some of the tension she had been suppressing, then nodded in agreement with the exiled ex-senator, reiterating the need for adaptation. Precisely, and with that in mind, our plans going forward can include conditions to take advantage of that, as proven by our findings at Tranya. Miara added, then continued. We will need more pilots with Admiral Fang's absence, specifically those that have a working knowledge of various Imperial craft. She finished with a note of rekindled enthusiasm in her voice. With all due respect, Captain, you have the means at your disposal to take advantage of said protocols as they transpire in real time, whereas the rest of us... Draven stopped himself with both hands held in the air about him. Mira refused to get drawn into this topic again and motioned to her side, where Nadali stood, her arms folded across her chest. Miara flashed her a brief smile and nodded toward her. Nadali took the cue and approached the table at Miara's side. In the interest of negating political rant, of which I am not equipped in any case, I will present to you an opportunity to establish our own network of intelligence that will supersede that currently employed. The captain's inference concerning Imperial acquisition has also given us the capability to monitor their every move on a galactic scale. I was able to seed myself into the highest levels of the ISB's internal workings, and am currently maintaining that feed into a shadow relay of sorts that should remain undetected. Nadali presented to the forum of rebel leadership. What are you suggesting, Fardy? General Draven asked skeptically, attempting to hide the contempt he felt. While your current network was sufficient in the past, it will not serve in the present. Simple calculations reduce the odds of success, or even survival, given your current system in place, coupled with renewed Imperial strategy, at less than 17% overall. Nadali fired off in rapid cadence. Odds I am certain no one in their right mind would accept, she finished, watching as the man's hollow image held contempt, crossing his own arms to cement the emotion. Nadali watched as the man actively caught up with the conversation and seemed to understand that her comments weren't political by any means. He dropped his arms to his sides and leaned forward, displaying his understanding through pliability. Okay, Fardy, what do you need? He asked earnestly. Teams of droids. The ability to interconnect those droids into the network I have already established. Access to sector assets. To start, I need to know what is available, what we need to acquire, who can accomplish specific tasks and establish response times to Imperial actions. And, as the captain has already pointed out, pilots. We are going to need pilots. She rattled off the facts for all to hear. General Draven leaned closer to the cam at his table many light years distant. That is a tall ask, Nadali, and with Fang's absence, not something we can provide now in any case. But I think I understand where you're going with this. I am more than willing to accept your suggestions, but we cannot move forward without the Admiral's involvement. General, Nadali, we have an accord moving forward. I will contact the two of you directly to meet these challenges, Mon Mothma chimed in, purely in the interest of moving things along. General Madine, she asked, passing the floor. My only question is about your status and expected ETA at Kuri. The teams there are waiting on your unit to provide recon so they can move on to their next phases. The expected question came from the cleanly groomed holoimage. Purely in the interest of security, mind you. Bothans too tend to stand out in a congregation, he added. We have an assignment planetside, and Rao is currently present, Miara said, everyone nodding around the table, comprehending the inference. Give us 2 hours standard, and we'll be on our way, General. Excellent, Captain, thank you, he said with a pleasant bow. Give your best to Yamat. Indeed, General. Thank you both for your input, suggestions, and cooperation. We will be in touch, and feel free to reach out if your teams need anything. Stay safe, Mon Mothma said with finality, the entirety of the holo display evaporating into the air with an emitted chirp, drowning the room in a brief respite of darkness before illumination remitted to fill the holo room with its soft glow. This is why I prefer to retain my present rank and nothing more. Miara spoke to the air before her, pushing herself away from the holo table and turning to Nadali. Thank the stars for Mon Mothma is all the more I will say on the topic, she finished with a broad smile, Nadali nodding her head in return. You'll get no argument from me there, Miara, Nadali offered, chuckling her response. Miara offered the Thebescan a playful slap on the shoulder. Are you headed down with us? Negative. I am going back to the Gond to check on the status of the droid sweep and power up the command center while we remain docked. I'll catch up, time permitting. Miara flashed Nadali a knowing smile. I'm always working. She would appreciate your presence, you know. Nadali offered a non-committal grin and drooped her head. I know, Captain, but that shadow network I mentioned to the Council is tenuous and will require constant monitoring until I'm confident in its stability. The new droids will provide ample trial material when properly wiped. Miara nodded her understanding and made to exit the room, bringing her wrist comm to her mouth. Naki, status. Captain, Naki, the shuttle is loaded up and waiting on you, ma'am, came the static-laced response as he rapidly strode down a vacant corridor. Copy. On my way, she said in return. Miara tapped the white blinking key on the same device. Commander, continuous scans. I want an appraisal if anything enters the system. We won't have much time. Begin transporting the recon team to the LC. After we offload, she stuttered, forgetting to ask Nadali if she had established a false signature registry for the light cruiser. A gurgling chimed in over the comm. Copy, Mom. We are already operating at General Quarters. Stay safe, Captain. Aturg barked his response. Mira tapped at the comm again. Nadali, you have a name for this LC? Only seconds passed. Pervader, came her quick response. Interesting play on the upcoming task we have for it, I suppose, Mira thought. Copy, thanks, she said quickly. Miara rounded the intersection of conjoining corridors and saw the hatchway open to the waiting shuttle. For the first time acknowledging the brewing tension and nervousness within the pit of her stomach. It was just another planet after all, she continued to tell herself, yet she could not eliminate the feelings as she could not eliminate her past. Back to where it all began, she mumbled to herself as she entered the airlock and punched the locking mechanism. The lock's doors closing behind her with a menacing hiss and a deep resounding clank. Upon entering the shuttle, Miera eyed the stack of respectfully shrouded Imperial corpses, unnerved at the prospect of what she had intended for them. For an instant, she wanted to unholster a blaster again and expend the remainder of its power cell in an attempt at revenge or unleash forceful kicks into their sides. Still, she thought better of it and made her way to the acceleration seats in the passenger's cabin. She dropped herself into the unforgiving plastoid chair, buckled herself in, and motioned forward to one of Naki's troopers to depart. She lowered her head into her hands, feeling the few tears that managed to breach her resolve with her fingertips, deciding she would rather bury her emotions in her own hands than chance the scene out of the starboard viewport to Riedo below. Nadali, back on her newly acquired freighter, switched off the backup power draw to the Gazanti's ion engines, finalizing her ability to reroute the remainder of power needed to fire up the entirety of the command center in the ship's hold behind her. She blew out a breath of steam in the chill air before her. She checked the stability of the connection she had enacted between the ship's reactor and the command center's relays, positive that nothing would sever her ability to engage the cruiser's functionality if the need arose. She left the cockpit through the open doorway and approached the command center's boxy frame, assuring herself that its physical connections were locked in place properly. Through her implant, she confirmed that she also had control of the light cruiser with which her current ship was docked, and that both operated within the same framework. Defensive capabilities would have to be negated for the intense focus required to maintain that framework, relying entirely on the Challenger for those purposes. She tapped the side of her implant. "Commander, going dark. I am in your hands." Aturg replied with his customary gargle of air. "On setu fari, jigod amtigan," he said in flawless Thebascan. "Impressive, Commander. My appreciation," she replied while nodding. A warm feeling gently washed through her upon hearing her native tongue. A sincere appreciation indeed that the Mon Calamari had taken the time to learn it. "Anything from my favorite Thebascan," he replied in what passed for a Mon Calamari's attempt at sarcasm, a forced gargle eliminating any humor it may have held. He cleared his throat with gusto and inhaled deeply. "We'll stay with you as long as you need, Nadali," he recovered. "Again, my appreciation, Commander," she responded with sincere thanks. What was touted as barren, rocky, and sparse upon initial suggestions some months back to utilize the out-of-the-way moon was, in fact, anything but. The descriptions were accurate in the not-so-distant past as Ahsoka walked with Bren and Konda through ankle-high saplings of unknown variety. Small, bright green and circular leaves gently sprouted from thin stalks, blowing with a slight breeze from the east, bathing the valley before them with the sense of new life. Prominent, craggy escarpments rose high above them to meet the sky, Raida's brilliant sun exposing crevasse and fissure alike, adding an element of reddish depth to the majesty of their crowns. Despite the distance above her, Ahsoka could see trailing vegetation escaping the confining shadows of the time-worn rock, purple flowers appearing at random intervals along their dark green stems. She lowered her head from the skyward view and focused on the two troopers walking at either side of her, their heads spinning around to take in their respective opinions. "Kind of beautiful in its own way," Bren commented after walking a few meters. "Reminds me of home," Konda responded, surprising Ahsoka, as he had said very little prior. "Home is to Prawa, isn't it?" Ahsoka said, noting the thick accent. "Northern regions, I would suspect." "How could you know that?" Konda asked quickly, stumbling to catch his footing. "Coastal, Darien province, west of Alir, hill country?" Ahsoka continued without answering him. Konda stopped altogether. His shoulders drooped as his mouth opened slack, trying to voice the improbability of her accuracy. "Konda, I've been about everywhere, to be honest, but I also take the time to absorb my surroundings wherever I may be." Bren had stopped to match the two, turning to face them. "Haurun Kal, somewhere near Pelak Ba. You have since eliminated your Pelak accent, though." Ahsoka said over her shoulder. It's a shame, really. That is one of the more enjoyable accents to listen to. Both troopers were speechless as Ahsoka nodded in her direction with a smile. Just up here, she said, motioning to a small rocky overhang where two familiar men were waiting for her. Bren and Konda stared at each other, stupefied, lacking words of any sort to explain what they had just experienced. He could feel the pangs of homesickness yanking at his core, the depth of which could only be matched by the expression on Bren's face, her eyes welling with the threat of emotion. Heave to, troopers, over here, a gruff voice said, distracting them both. Turning to face the voice with hints of recognition, they were not surprised to see a face known to the galactic whole. Dispensing with formalities, just call me Rex. The two almost tripped over one another in their haste to follow that last order. A hooded man stood next to the aging clone, his ragged facial hair excellently hiding any identifiable features. These two are going to ask you a few questions. It will help us all decide what to do with you, Ahsoka said bluntly to both Bren and Konda. Turning to Rex, she clapped him on the shoulder and whispered thanks to them both. I'll return the speeder, she said before facing the troopers again. Just be honest with them, she began, then paused, framing a more severe look. Know, however, that your days serving the Empire are at an end. She rested a hand on each of their shoulders and nodded to them in turn. She took a few paces toward Ani's Z74Z before Rex called out to her. Where is the third? He asked. He is resting, Konda said before Ahsoka could address the question. His head isn't right, he finished, adopting a forlorn expression. He's with Zeb. They'll be along, Ahsoka assured him. Swinging her leg over the bike, she cycled the repulsor, throttled the Scorus, and raced back the way they had come. Sabine at her side, Kawani looked up and into Fen Rao's eyes. The deep-set orbs presented nothing but pride and honor as they focused back solely on her. He smiled down at her before setting his helmet at his feet as the rocky grove echoed the trills of an advancing speeder bike. Kawani felt her entire body relax as the sound grew louder, basking herself in the joy of knowing Ahsoka would be present. She let an unseen smile spread across her face as she felt Togruta's presence on her other side. Kawani closed her eyes to the sights and ears to the sounds for a moment, letting that elation run its course from head to toe. Ali, family, Rao began in his unforgettable, stoically deep voice. Kawani opened her eyes and felt Sabine and Ahsoka place their hands on her shoulders. She was surprised to see the flickering three-quarter image of Ursa Wren presented next to him. It is a proud day for Clan Wren. It is a proud day for House Vizsla. And it is a proud day for Mandalore. Although we have been excised from our home, we all carry Mandalore with us, Ursa said with equal measures of eloquence and stolidity, a seriousness in her eyes and facial expression not at all lost within her hollow image. Fen, she finalized with a slight turn toward Rao. Kawani, Ani Yamat. It is your intention to accept the honor presented to you, to accept our creed as jurisprudence, to place your clan, your house, and the Mandalore above all else? Kawani squinted a tear from her eye. It is, Protector, she said a little too loudly, feeling Sabine chuckle at her side. Ani, remove your helmet, Rao said. Kawani caught a light cough from someone behind her. She complied, setting it before her feet, as was his. Is it your intention, Ursa Wren, matriarch of Clan Wren, House Vizsla, to accept Kawani Amat into your family as one of your own? To teach her the ways of the Mandalorian, to instruct her within the creed, and to accept her as your daughter? For a brief second, the image of Ursa crackled, Kawani sensing the crease of a smile forming across her lips. It is, Protector. Fen turned back toward Kawani. Remove your vambrace and approach. Kawani didn't hesitate. She unclipped the vambrace from her wrist and walked right up to him, presenting her left hand palm up. Rao took the vambrace from her and flipped it over in his hand, accessing the core of the armor's chain code index. He retrieved a small dagger from his belt and lightly slashed Kawani's left hand, leaving a thin blade of blood trailing from her palm to her wrist. He dabbed the dagger's tip into the trail and brought it to the small receptor within the index, tapping the handle to expel its cargo. The diminutive mechanism chirped twice before closing in on itself. Rao flipped the vambrace over in his hand and accessed the chain code interface from a tiny 3-button control, emitting a small flickering hollow image consisting of Mandoan script. Your vambrace once belonged to Savitar, Clan Saxon, House Vizsla. Savitar, having been a victim of the continual purge of our people, lost this armor through death. It is by the will of the Mandalore that this armor returns to its proper place in House Vizsla, now Clan Ren. He returned the vambrace to Kawani, clipping it back into its permanent home, now hers and hers alone. Kawani bowed before him as Sabine handed Rao the helmet Kawani had placed on the ground. Fen took it and repeated the process with another light slash across her left palm. On the back rim of the helmet was an identical access port to its chain code index. Fen touched the sensor pad after the access port had sealed itself, and the same script appeared through her visor slots. Your helmet once belonged to Rentar, Clan Saxon, House Vizsla. Rentar, having been a victim of the continual purge of our people, lost this armor through death. It is by the will of the Mandalore that this armor returns to its proper place in House Vizsla, now Clan Ren. Sisters, Kawani thought. Her mood sorrowed for a moment at that thought, turning to anger when the thought revealed the truth of their demise. She could feel Ahsoka's light touch at her side, drawing out the anger through her fingertips on the back of her neck. The anger was replaced immediately by a calming peace that let her appreciate both the importance of the moment and the bond they had created together. Ani, Rao said, expressing mild confusion. Apologies, Protector, she said, attempting to renew her resolve. She blinked away the trailing thoughts and focused on the items in the hands before her. What? Was her only response upon seeing the set of pauldrons in his grasp. He chuckled briefly before resuming his stoicism. Although the ongoing purge is a blight on our past, it is a motivation for our future. It is through it we gain access to our strength. Through that strength we define our honor. It is honor that has presented Clan Ren with Beskar to forge for you these pauldrons. May they serve you well. Ahsoka and Sabine took one from his grasp and clipped it onto the Mirialan's shoulders. The fit was perfect. Your code is the only chain on the index and is already active, Ani Amat, daughter of Clan Ren. Your previous actions have more than sufficed in the eyes of your matron to negate the need for trial. However, the remainder of your armor will be presented upon completion of those trials, as directed by the matriarch of Clan Ren. Fen Rao finished with a flourish, Kawani certain that the man defined honor in the eyes of his people. Kawani lost herself in that moment, lost to her surroundings on this strange planet, in front of strangers, friends, and family. Her family, old and new. The completeness she felt made more relevant by Ahsoka, her friend, confident and, for lack of a better term, master. By the sister at her other side, the one that had treated her as such the moment they met, and now one that was by more than instinct. By the man before her who had treated her with respect, listened to her stories, knew her past through them, and helped her navigate her present. By the image of her matron, her mother by all rights, beaming down with her own pride, not lost at all through the flickering waves passing through her. She felt Sabine kick at her foot, snapping her out of her reverie. Sorry, she mumbled, under her breath. Placing the helmet under her arm, she fell to one knee. I am my armor. May it protect me as I protect my clan, and as I protect my house. She felt the importance of every word, then continued as she had practiced. Ni jor char ari nir karyai at teknite ways. She couldn't remember the word in Mandoa. Bete Mando or Yampor, Nior Hat Nir, Mendokar, Bal, Oya Al Kebur Bik. She finished, realizing only then that Sabine was reciting the portion of the creed with her. Fen Rao beamed down upon her with extreme pride and mild shock at her attempt at the complicated language. Rise, Kawani Amat of Clan Ren, House Vizsla, and face your company. She heard Rao say. She did as instructed to her left, passing the smiling face of Ahsoka and taking in the entire platoon of Naki's infiltrators standing at attention. Captain Miralarte saluting, her other hand outstretched with the image of Nadali in the palm of her hand, hovering over a small hollow emitter. Lieutenant Naki himself, at full salute, holding his emitter, presenting the command deck of the Challenger. They were all focused on her, the weight of this moment, her moment, not lost on her as she choked back tears. She found Nadali again and pointed an outstretched finger toward her oldest friend, giving her a knowing wink. Ani has recited the second creed in our native tongue. Mostly. Fen boomed through the assemblage with a finishing chuckle. I call upon my house to teach me the ways of the Mandalorian. In return, I pledge my loyalty and life to protect it. Hearing the words recited back in basic brought the suppressed well of emotion exploding from her. Kawani began to shake from enthusiasm. Alit Orisha Taldin, she shouted to the sky as loud as she could, spittle forming at the corners of her mouth. Alit Orishai Taldin, she screamed louder, feeling the constraints of her throat closing in on her. Family is more than blood, she said a final time in basic for everyone's benefit. She slammed her helmet on her head, shot both hands straight up, and shouted, Oya! 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 Sabine, Fen, Ahsoka, and even the image of Ursa chanting with her. Not caring if they didn't know what it meant, the remainder of the assemblage began chanting as one, filling the rocky valley with the thunderous intonation. Kawani, letting untethered memories consume her mind, tied each one to the purpose shouts. She let thoughts of her parents, Mirial and Kino, drift in thought, then shouted them out into the chorus of renewing vows each member in attendance around her was adding to. She vowed to uphold her creeds and promises, new and old, with each shout, remembering with every syllable why she was here, how she was here, and every person who had been there for her. She looked around her and saw those same sentiments in the eyes of others, then shouted anew, knowing she wasn't the only one who had vowed this day.